For 22 years, audiences knew Darth Vader only as a villain, a masked enforcer, a symbol of tyranny and terror. Then in 1999, they learned he was once a 9-year-old slave boy who wanted to help people. A slave child becomes the most powerful warrior in the galaxy, wins his freedom, finds love, gains purpose, then loses everything. His mother, his wife, his body, his identity, and becomes the thing he feared most. Millions watch this story and see themselves, not in the heroism, in the fall. The mystery became a tragedy. The villain became a mirror. This is not about whether Anakin Skywalker is good or evil. This is about why his tragedy resonates so deeply that people defend it like it's their own. And millions of people saw themselves in that reflection. This is about what they saw and why they cannot look away. My name is Winston Eves, and from my library we are examining one of modern fiction's most enduring tragic heroes. But to understand the tragedy, we must first understand the mystery. When Darth Vader appeared in 1977, audiences knew nothing. A black armored figure, mechanical breathing, supernatural powers. He force chokes subordinates, tortures prisoners, and destroys planets.
Winston, he was pure villain back then, yeah? No backstory, no sympathy, just the bad guy in black. Man walk in, everybody start trembling. Credits roll. What changed? What, somebody finally decide he deserved a back page in the history book?
What changed was 5 words: I am your father. That moment in 1980 transformed everything. Vader was not just a villain. He was a person with history, with relationships, with a name, Anakin Skywalker. The question immediately became, who was he before the mask? For nearly 2 decades, that question haunted audiences. But the core mystery remained: how does someone become that? What turns a person into Darth Vader?
And people spent 20 years wondering, creating theories. That's a long time for a mystery mind. 20 years is not curiosity anymore. That's emotional rent. Folks out here paying monthly installments to a man in a mask.
That is a long time to project, to imagine, to fill the gaps with whatever you needed the answer to be. And then in 1999, George Lucas provided an answer. A slave child on Tatooine, kind, selfless, extraordinarily powerful. The villain had been humanized before, but now he was innocent, pure, a child with heroic instincts and impossible circumstances. The mystery gained dimension. This was not corruption from nothing. This was a fall, a tragedy waiting to happen.
So the prequels changed him from mysterious villain to tragic hero? From Vader back to Anakin? That is some reverse haunting. Like the ghost walk in and you find out it was a sweet little boy the whole time. Winston, that mess is wicked.
The prequels reveal that Vader was always Anakin. The mask was not a transformation, it was a conclusion, and audiences spent the next decade watching that conclusion approach. The prequel trilogy built Anakin's fall methodically. Phantom Menace established innocence. Attack of the Clones introduced attachment and fear. Revenge of the Sith delivered catastrophe. But the fall was not smooth. Attack of the Clones contained a moment that divided audiences. Anakin slaughters an entire Tusken village after they torture and kill his mother. Women, children, everyone. He confesses to Padme. She comforts him rather than recoils.
Winston, that's mass murder. And she just accepts it? How did audiences respond to that? Because if I confess that to a woman, I am not getting comforted. I am getting blocked. I am getting exiled. I am getting escorted off the planet.
Then came Revenge of the Sith. The fall completed. Anakin's nightmares about losing Padme drive him to desperate measures. Palpatine offers power to prevent death. Anakin pledges himself, murders Mace Windu, and goes to the Jedi Temple. What happens at the temple was shown through implication. Silhouettes, ignited lightsaber, children's faces. The massacre is clear. The specifics are left to imagination, perhaps mercifully. And then Mustafar. He force chokes Padme while she is pregnant, fights Obi-Wan, loses and burns. The transformation completes. Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader.
That's dark, Winston. Tragic, yeah, but dark. How did that play with audiences who spent years waiting to see how he fell? Because one minute it's heartbreak, next minute it's war crimes. People queue up for a tragedy and get a horror film.
Some were satisfied, some were devastated. Most immediately began analyzing what went wrong, not with the film, with Anakin. What could have prevented this? Whose fault was it really? And the debates revealed the identification. People needed someone to blame. The Jedi for being too rigid, Obi-Wan for being too critical, Padme for being too passive, Palpatine for being too manipulative, anyone except Anakin for choosing what he chose. But the story did not end in 2005. For nearly 2 decades since, additional material has continued expanding Anakin's character, filling gaps, adding context, complicating the tragedy. The Clone Wars animated series ran from 2008 to 2020, 7 seasons depicting Anakin between episodes 2 and 3, and it changed how audiences understood him. This Anakin is heroic. Genuinely, he saves innocents, protects his troops, shows mercy to enemies, forms deep friendships. He is the hero the prequels implied, but did not always demonstrate.
So the show made him more likable, more sympathetic before the fall, like a long apology tour before the disaster. That's smart though. Make him charming first. Then when he crash out, everybody feel it in their chest.
The show made him more human, which makes the fall more devastating. When you spend 7 seasons watching this character save lives, the knowledge that he will eventually slaughter children becomes unbearable tension. But the show also sees the darkness carefully. His rage when Obi-Wan is presumed dead, his willingness to use violence when frustrated. The series shows that Anakin was always capable of what he became. The seeds were present throughout. The fall was not sudden corruption, it was gradual erosion. Then came additional material. Comics depicting moments between films, novels exploring his internal state. The 2017 Darth Vader comics by Charles Soule showed his immediate transformation, how Anakin was crushed and Vader emerged. These stories reveal that becoming Vader required killing Anakin internally. The famous comic panel where Vader says Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him. While bleeding through his suit, the tragedy deepens. He murders his own identity.
So decades of content, all building on the same character, all adding layers to the same tragedy. Winston, that's a lot of material for audiences to get attached to. At that point, he's not even a character. He's a family member. People grew up with him, like a cousin who keep making terrible decisions, but you still invite him to dinner.
That is over 40 years of material, multiple generations raised with different entry points. Some met him as Vader first, some as young Anakin, some through Clone Wars. Each entry point created a different emotional investment, but all path leads to the same place. A character whose tragedy has been examined from every angle, whose fall has been contextualized, analyzed, justified, and mourned, continuously for decades. So what happens psychologically when audiences invest as deeply in a tragic character, when they spend years, sometimes decades, engaging with his story? Narrative psychologists study how audiences form bonds with fictional characters. Extended exposure creates familiarity. Familiarity breeds attachment. Attachment creates investment. And investment makes criticism feel personal. Anakin's story is structured to facilitate deep identification. His emotions are accessible: fear of loss, frustration with authority, desire to protect loved ones, love expressed through possession.
Those are universal emotions though, Winston. Everyone fears losing people they love. Everyone gets frustrated with unfair rules. That's human, not specific to Anakin, yeah? So when folks say they relate, it makes sense. It's just that most people don't respond by joining the dark side and swinging on everybody.
Precisely, which is why millions of people across cultures and generations connect with him. You may never face Sith Lords or fight in Clone Wars, but you have feared loss. You have felt institutions constrain you unfairly. You have wanted control when circumstances felt chaotic. Anakin's specific circumstances are fantastical. His emotional core is universal, and audiences project their own experiences onto that core. The comments reveal this constantly. I lost my mother young like Anakin did. I've had nightmares about losing my partner. I felt dismissed by people who were supposed to guide me. The audiences mapped their trauma onto his, their fears onto his, their anger onto his. And when you have projected your own pain onto a character, criticism of that character becomes criticism of your pain. When someone says Anakin's fear of loss does not justify what he did, someone who has connected their own fear of loss to his character hears your fear is invalid.
So people defend Anakin because they're defending their own emotion? Because they saw themselves in him, and now he's connected to their identity? That is dangerous, Winston. You tie your heart to a fictional man, and now any critique feel like a personal attack. Next thing you know, you in the comments fighting like you getting paid.
For some, yes. Not everyone. But the pattern is observable in intense fandom spaces. The people most aggressive in defending Anakin's choices are often those most open about relating to his emotional journey. TikTok is particularly revealing. Videos where people explain why I relate to Anakin accumulate millions of views. They discuss their own experiences with loss, abandonment, institutional failure, and fear. They explicitly connect their life to his story. And once that connection forms, once his story becomes a framework for understanding your story, the tragedy is no longer fictional, it is personal. His fall becomes your fear, his choices become your hypotheticals, his redemption becomes your hope. But we must address why this particular tragic hero resonates so intensely in this cultural moment. Anakin's emotional conflict is distinctly modern. The feeling that systems claim to help you while actually constraining you, that authority figures are hypocritical, that institutions demand loyalty without providing support, that your suffering is dismissed by the people who do not understand. The Jedi Order as depicted has meaningful flaws. They take children from families, they forbid attachment while forming their own institutional attachments. They serve a corrupt republic while claiming political neutrality. They tell Anakin he is too old for training and then train him, too dangerous to be a Jedi, then make him one, too emotional for rank, then demand his service.
So the story is a warning, Winston, about what happens when frustration with imperfect systems leads you to something worse. Because I see that all the time. People get hurt by a bad system and run straight into the arms of the first smooth talker with a promise and a cape.
The Jedi fail Anakin in measurable ways. They are institutionally flawed, which is why his frustration resonates. Audiences watch these failures and recognize their own experiences with institutions. Surveys throughout the 2000s and 2020s documented declining trust in institutions across demographics, government, education, religion, and media, particularly among younger generations who came of age during economic instability and institutional scandals. When audiences, especially younger audiences, watch Anakin distrust the Jedi Council, they understand. They feel the same about their own institutional authorities. The difference is Anakin has a lightsaber. But here is where fiction and reality diverge critically. Anakin's frustrations with institutional hypocrisy is valid. His solution, pledging himself to an autocrat who promises simple answers and unlimited power, is catastrophic. He trades flawed democracy for tyranny, imperfect peacekeepers for a Sith Lord. He chooses certainty over complexity, control over trust, power over patience, and it destroys everything he wanted to protect. The story functions as a warning if you observe it from the outside. But for audiences who identify with Anakin's frustration so intensely that his perspective becomes their perspective, the warning becomes harder to hear. The emotional identification overrides the narrative lesson. And you see this in discussions. The Jedi pushed him to it. What choice did he have? The system failed him first. All true, all contextually relevant. None of it removes his responsibility for his actions. But we have not yet addressed the final piece of Anakin's story. The reason many audiences defend him so passionately. He is redeemed. In 1983, Vader saves Luke from the Emperor, throws the Emperor down the shaft, and dies as Anakin, not Vader. The mask comes off. The man underneath is scarred but human. He is forgiven and becomes a Force ghost.
So he's redeemed, Winston. He turned back to the light, saved his son, destroyed the Emperor. That's the hero's journey completed, yeah? Redemption arc finished? Man pull one good move at the end and everybody start clapping like the whole history got erased. Humans love a dramatic exit.
That is the narrative structure, fall and redemption. But the redemption is controversial because one act of self-sacrifice does not erase decades of atrocity. As Vader, he murdered countless people, destroyed planets, tortured prisoners, hunted down remaining Jedi. The body count is astronomical. One act of saving his son is narratively redemptive. But is it morally redemptive? Audiences are divided. Some say redemption is always possible. Some say certain actions are unforgivable regardless of later choices. Some say that redemption works narratively, but not ethically. The debate has continued for 40 years.
But Winston, if the story says he's redeemed, if he becomes a Force ghost, gets forgiven, is remembered as Anakin, not Vader, doesn't that settle it? I mean, the universe itself stamp it official. That is the cosmic receipt right there. People just don't like the answer because it's messy.
The story settles it. The audience does not, because audiences bring their own concepts of justice, forgiveness, and redemption, and those concepts vary dramatically. For those who identify deeply with Anakin's fall, His redemption is essential. It proves that people who make terrible choices can still choose differently, that the worst version of yourself is not permanent, that love can break through darkness. His redemption becomes symbolic hope. The most devoted fans emphasize his redemption constantly. He came back. He chose love in the end. He died a hero. For over 40 years, audiences have engaged with Anakin Skywalker's story. Multiple films, television series, comics, and novels. Endless analysis. Billions of views across social media. He is one of the most examined characters in modern fiction. What makes this culturally significant is not the character himself. It is the mirror he provides. What the audiences see when they look at him, and what that reveals about the people looking. Some see a cautionary tale, a warning about fear leading to control, control leading to violence, violence leading to loss of self. They observe the tragedy from outside, learn the lesson, and move on.
And others, Winston? Come on now, man, don't leave me hanging. I know you about to say something cold enough to freeze the candle.
Others see themselves, their fears reflected, their frustrations validated, their capacity for darkness acknowledged, and they defend him because defending him means defending the possibility that those same emotions in themselves do not make them monsters. When someone says, "I understand why Anakin did what he did," they are not necessarily condoning child murder. They are saying, "I understand the emotions that led there." Fear of loss, desire for control, rage at systems that fail you, love that becomes possession. Those emotions are human, universal. Recognizing them in yourself is not wrong, but there is a distance between understanding an emotion and justifying the actions that follow. Between empathy for a character and identification so complete that criticism of them feels like criticism of you. And that distance is where the conversation becomes interesting, because it reveals not just who Anakin is, but who the audience fears they might become. For 40 years, people have watched his story. The slave child who becomes a hero, who becomes a monster, who becomes, perhaps, redeemed. And millions have said, "I see myself in that." The question is not whether Anakin Skywalker is good or evil. The story provides that. He is both. He is tragic. The question is what you see when you look at him. A character whose flaws led to catastrophe? A victim of systems and manipulation? A warning about the dangers of fear and attachment? A symbol of impossible redemption? Or a mirror reflecting something you recognize but wish you did not? When you watch Anakin choose fear over trust, power over patience, control over surrender, when you watch him fall and understand exactly how he got there, when you defend his choices, or minimize his responsibility, or emphasize his redemption, you're revealing something, not about Anakin, about you. Who do you see? But these are just my observations.